what do we want out of this economy? I believe in the capitalist system. I believe in profits. I believe in management rights to manage. I believe in the return for invested capital, because otherwise we can't expand. These are the lifeblood of capital. But what do I disagree with? I disagree with the share of the wealth that's produced that the worker gets. I have the old-fashioned idea that this dynamic economy that we like to boast about, and it's the best, with all its faults, it's the best, that this dynamic economy has been based through our entire history on the amount of purchasing power in the hands of the great mass of the people. And our job is to try to get that purchasing power in the hands of the great mass of the people.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Not many Americans get the opportunity to sit in on a congressional hearing. This month on COPE Report, you will sit alongside AFL-CIO President George Meany at a hearing of the Joint Economic Committee of the Congress. The subject was controls, and in spirited exchanges, President Meany presented labor's case for fair and equitable controls across the board. The first questioner will be Senator William Proxmire of Wisconsin, the committee chairman. But now, back to President Meany.
Now look at our 14.5 million members. When their wives come home complaining, and I know they complain about prices going up. Some of the prices are unbelievable. Where does that worker go? He's organized. Well, he goes to his organization. And how does he compensate for this increase in his living expenses? By looking to his employer and saying, I need more money. It's just as simple as that. Now, if you kept the cost of living down, I say to you quite frankly, you would have less trouble with wage settlements as they come up. But a system which has every employer in this country as an enforcer, delighted to be an enforcer, even when he gets fined. You know, they cracked down on a chain store yesterday. The government finally cracked down on the chain store over in Baltimore. In fact, they fined him $2,500. Not for raising prices, though, but for raising wages illegally. And they fined the corporation $2,500. And the meat cutters union, they fined them $2,500. And they fined the meat cutters affected so much out of their day's pay. So in that way, the corporation will get its $2,500 back quite quickly. The Longshore case took $17 million out of the pockets of 15,000 housewives at the rate of $15 a week. And that was a contract signed. And it was signed on the basis of an increase in productivity that was without parallel in that industry or perhaps in any other industry. It went up 33% since the last contract was signed. And they wanted to get something for it. And the employer was willing to pay them something for it. They were willing to give them something for the money they saved. They brought down the cost of tonnage. They brought down the amount of time involved and all these things. And what was the result? The pay board took $17 million away from them. Now, I ask you, Senator, and I've asked this in a lot of places, and I haven't yet to get an answer. What does the return of that $17 million out of the pockets of the workers and into the treasury of the employer, what does that do to bring down prices? We'd have felt better to have the employer pass it on to the consumer. Oh, no, they didn't say that. Or if they even said, give it to the little sister of the poor, we might have felt better. But we felt pretty bad to take $17 million out of the pocket of these workers that they felt that they had earned, that the employer conceded that they had earned. You take it out of their pocket by an executive fiat, and you give it to the employer. Now, what did that do to fight prices?
Mr. Meany, I think that what you've just said, many could agree with. I agree with much of it, most of it. There isn't any other organization that has fought as hard for liberal principles or for a fair, decent opportunity for the American worker and for those who are associated with the American worker, organized and unorganized, as the AFL-CIO has. But under these circumstances, how in the world does your withdrawal from the pay board really serve the best interests of the American public, let alone American labor? How about the national interest?
It's not going to interfere with the pay board. The pay board is functioning.
Well, it would function a lot better if we had on the board a group that represented the broad interest that you've just spoken about.
In other words, they wouldn't be functioning under a facade of deceit. They're at least functioning now for what they are. They're a government board.
Well, don't you really fear that your resignation just gives the administration a convenient scapegoat? They can blame whatever happens now on the fact that you walked off and walked away from it?
We were the scapegoat from the start. When Arthur Burns' own ivory tower collapsed, he forgot all about it. He went out making anti-labor speeches. We had to be controlled.
But just consider the dilemma you now put the country and the Congress in. What are we going to do about it? We now have a situation where the...
Well,
I
shall tell you what you do
well,
about
let me finish.
Sounds like a meeting of the Foreign Relations Committee.
Well, that's the best compliment I've had today, although it sounds to me more like a meeting of the AFL-CIO Executive Conference.
Oh, no, oh, no. Oh, no. Our meetings are more like prayer meetings.
Here is the...
We look at the White House and we pray for the country.
Many people don't think that compulsory arbitration is a very likely possibility. We've been able to stop it and kill it year after year. But now we're in a dilemma. We're in a real dilemma. I think that many people consider, and I consider too, that the whole anti-inflation program may have been blown out of the water. Prices going up at a 6% rate underline that. Now, doesn't your walk-off of the pay board really play right into the hands of those who want compulsory arbitration?
Oh, I don't think we have to play into their hands. If they want compulsory arbitration, I don't think they need...
Well, your walk-off
I don't think
now,
they need encouragement from me. Let the pay board alone. You say, what can you do? Let the pay board alone. The pay board's doing its job. It's keeping wages down.
You say now with...
Let it alone. It's not going to change. But take care of Mr. Grayson. Let us get some price control. Because if you're going to control inflation, you've got to control prices. And you are not controlling prices. So your job is quite obvious. It's right there in front of you. Let the pay board alone. They'll continue their 5.5%, and after a while we'll get used to it. But what about prices? The price control situation, as it's presented to American people, is an absolute fraud. You are not controlling prices. We had 200,000 people on OPA, and you know, Mr. Nixon was one of those 200,000. And he has said publicly time and time, I will not create a new bureaucracy. Well, I say to you, and I say to him too, if you don't create a new bureaucracy, you are not going to control prices. Just as simple as that.
The other committee members asking questions were Senator Jacob Javits of New York and Republican Congressman Clarence Brown and Barbara Conable.
I yield to Congressman Conable.
Sometimes it isn't necessary to ask questions, Mr. Meany. You referred to plumbers and lawyers. I suspect that I can think of one plumber who couldn't have become a more passionate advocate if he'd had all the legal training in the world. I'd like to ask you, sir...
Of plumbers and lawyers, I think of our large cities. You know, you could have 7 million people in a large city without lawyers. You couldn't have them without plumbers.
Let me ask you, sir, do you feel that we should have control of food prices?
Well, absolutely.
Do you see any problem of supply?
Leaving food prices out is nonsensical.
Would you impose those before the farmers plant their crops this year or afterwards?
That, of course, is something the administration had to figure. I'm not going to get into details about the farmers planting them. I would like to see them imposed as soon as possible on food prices. Now,
you don't see any problem
when they imposed the freeze on wages, they didn't give us a chance to do any planting of any kind. We just, bang, we were out.
Mr. Meany continued his answer.
I'm advocating controls across the board. I'm advocating what I advocated in February of 1966. Controls across the board. If the president decides they're necessary, they should be equitable, and they should call for equal sacrifice on all segments of our society. That's what I'm advocating right this minute.
And you're willing to accept the implications of food price controls if that means rationing and
You bet your life
supply.
I am. Yes, sir. At least it would be some attempt at bringing equity into this picture.
You don't see any problem of public support if people walk up to counters that are empty in this time when many people don't feel there is a sufficient national crisis to involve total controls?
My people feel that there is sufficient reason to control food prices and all prices that we got to pay, and it's just as simple as that. Our wages are controlled.
Well, are they advocating the result or the process if they are asking for food prices?
They're advocating equity. We can appear before the board as advocates of our contracts, just the same as we appeared before. But we've dropped the pretense that we have anything to do with the decisions. The problem is not the pay board. The pay board's going to go on its way, I'm quite sure. They may use some of the flexibility that they have here and there, but the big question is prices. You have wage control. There's no problem in this country. You have wage control. If that's what you want, you've got it. That's what the president wants. He's got it. We don't argue with that. And you're going to continue to have it. And it's going to be very, very effectively policed. Now we want price control. That's what we want.
If you could design a system, then, that would be fair at this point, it would involve not any real change on the pay side, except perhaps that you'd like to feel that you had some influence there. But on the price side, you'd like to have a complete setup adequate to control prices in
Right.
every four corners
Right.
wherever they're
Right.
moving up.
Yep.
And that is what your primary advocacy would be at this point.
That's our primary problem right now.
You're
We're
still-
not worried about the pay board.
You're
That's
still
behind us.
interested in an excess profits tax, I assume, despite the fact
Oh,
that the
yes.
economists have all opposed that. I know
yeah.
you've been strongly
Oh, well, yes,
supportive of that.
of course, this may affect the GNP, and of course, I'll really go into, well, I'll take the veil. I'll really weep if the GNP goes down. This is really awful. You know, profits are hitting record heights. And somehow or other, the old trickle-down theory isn't working. Maybe it'll work after a while. But profits are hitting record heights, and we're getting squeezed at the checkout counter in the supermarket.
You'd like control of prices then, and primarily of food, or at least that's the area of great concern apparently from the chart
I
you
would
presented.
like to see price control.
You'd like to see profits controlled. That's what an excess profits tax is, isn't it?
You mean to get them to bear more of the share? Oh, yes. I'd like to see the people getting these profits put a little more into the common till, into the federal treasury.
And what about interest?
Personally, I would like to see a federal ceiling on interest. Now, of course, I'm not a financial expert, but I can't see any reason under the sun why any interest rate anywhere at any time should be over 6%.
Representative Conable wondered,
Is there any other element then that you would like to have controlled beside these?
Oh, you've got interest rates, you've got rents. Most rents have been decontrolled. I don't know what the Price Commission's reasoning is, but they seem to decontrol more than they control. But to put it as simply as I can, I don't think under the present setup that you're going to control prices. You've got to have more machinery. You've got to have more people. It's just as simple as that. I don't know the number of retail establishments in this country, but they must run into the hundreds of thousands. I don't think anyone can argue that the only thing that goes into the prices we pay is wages, while labor contributes to higher prices. No question about that. It does not play a major role in the higher prices in a good many industries.
the next questioner was Congressman Brown from Ohio.
President Meany, as I understand it, you were originally for controls in the economy to resolve this problem.
I don't think that's a proper statement.
Didn't you urge on the
No,
Congress?
we did not urge controls. We said time and time again, if the President of the United States decides that controls are necessary, we will cooperate. Now, I think that's a big difference in saying we were for controls.
Well, now then, as I understand, the Congress gave the President the authority. And the President
Gave it a couple of years back, yes.
Yes, and the President acted on that authority, and then you state on page 8 of your testimony that we urge the Congress to tighten the substantive provisions of the Act, but not to extend the Act's authority beyond the original termination date of April 30th,
That's right.
1972.
That's right.
Well, now that would seem to be a position against controls.
Oh, no, what we were saying was you gave the President the power to use these controls, and he didn't use them. He said he wasn't going to use them. And then on August 15th, he suddenly decided to use them, and we didn't like the way he used them.
All right.
So what we said to Congress was, when you extend the controls, extend them only to April 30th, 1972, so you can take another look as to how he's using the additional extension.
All right, now Congress didn't do that. They extended them to
Yeah,
April
that's
73, and as I understand from what you told Mr. Conable in his questions, now what you'd like to do is to set up this $4 billion bureaucracy between now and April 30th, 73 to control this much more tightly.
I have not advocated the setting up of bureaucracy. I say very simply that from my experience, you will not control prices unless you set up the bureaucracy.
Well, I thought
Now,
you
the
told
President
Mr.
wants to-
Conable that you wanted food prices
I
controlled.
want everything controlled that my people have got to pay for, yes.
So you do want this set up
in
to go into
I
control?
I want it in the interest of equity.
All right.
Or I'll tell you, there's another alternative. Take off controls altogether. We'll buy that, too. We'll get along.
Well, now, which would you prefer? I'm confused about that.
Either one will do. We'd like to see prices come down, so give us full controls.
If we get food price controls and
we have no
shortage-
argument about wages then.
and we have shortages, would you favor rationing?
If that was necessary, sure. Whatever's necessary to give us equity. See,
All right.
we don't have equity in this
Well,
situation.
let's talk a little bit about the equity. The spendable weekly
Well, the-
earnings in constant dollars, August 71 through February of 72, are 5.9%. They've gone up 5.9%. The consumer price index on all items during that same period has gone up 3.3%. Now, I don't understand what equity would be on the basis of those figures.
Into the earnings figure, of course, goes your increase in productivity. In other words, you're not going to compare the earnings directly with the prices, because in the earnings figure, you've got to allow for increased productivity.
Well, what would you compare then? What dollar figure would you prepare in terms of wage increases?
Our figure that we presented to the pay board, I think, was 6.5, I think, something like that.
And that's made up of what?
It's made up of the cost of living. That's a normal. After all, there is a normal cost of living increase. We've never been without it for many, many years. Plus the offset for productivity. That's what it's made up of.
Congressman Brown's questions for President Meany continue on side 2 of this cassette.
Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
This is side 2 of Cope Report. This month, we continue with a special program, Meany on Controls. Testimony by AFL-CIO President George Meany before the Joint Economic Committee of the Congress. We pick up the hearings with Congressman Clarence Brown of Ohio, continuing his questioning.
You made a very eloquent, I thought, presentation. I was pleased to hear it because I think it represents a balanced view about the needs of our economy with reference to profits. The profit figure would indicate that as a percentage of GNP, corporate profits last year were 4.5%. Back in the 30s, they were 3.2.
Why is a percentage of GNP? Why use that measure?
Well, because I was going to compare it as I thought a fair comparison.
Why not what they made the year before? What's wrong with comparing what they made the year before? This business of a numbers game, you can play any kind of a game you want. You know, I've seen some figures come out of the White House just a short time ago which showed that the annual take-home pay of workers was going to increase by 16% in a year. They just took 1 month.
Will you allow me to complete my question? Let's take 65 to 71 as a reasonable period. Is that all right?
I don't know whether it's all right. What are you comparing it with? What are you using?
Well, I don't think you will think it's all right because
All right.
in the difference between corporate profits in 65 to 71 was a 2% rise. The gross national product in that period of time went up 53%. And during that period of time, the compensation to employees in this country went up 63%. Now, what are the figures that are desirable?
I read the Wall Street Journal and I read the figures. And here's Mr. Joseph Slevin. Now, he's not connected with labor, and he's supposed to be a financial writer, Washington Post. He said it now looks as U.S. corporations will chalk up their first $100 billion year in history. This is going to be a $100 billion year. First time went over. And the 100 large corporations went up 76% last year.
76% compared to the year before. The
Yeah,
year
that's
before
right,
was
the year
the lowest
before.
year since 1938. Now, do you want to get back to depression
The
levels in terms of profits and
lowest
wages?
year on what basis?
On the basis of the percentage
Of the GNP?
Of the GNP.
That don't mean anything to me at all. GNP percentage. That's. Now listen, the GNP
Well, let's look-
GNP is going up to record heights. We got 5 million people out of work. Welfare rolls are going up. Food
Let's-
prices are going up. Rents are going up.
Let's look at the difference
And the
between
GNP
1971,
the GNP
if we
is going
can.
up. Goody for the GNP. But that isn't doing anything for my people.
Well, let me tell you what's happened in terms of percentage.
I'll tell you what's happening
of
for
wage
my people.
increases.
You tell
Well,
me
Could
what
I
you-
ask the questions, please, Mr. Meany? I have a limited amount of time. In terms of the percentage of return out of our economy of wages for individual employees, the jump since 1930, it was 52%. In 50, it was 54. In 60, it was 58% of the GNP. And in 71, it is 61%. Now, that seems to me to be a reasonable growth of the return that labor receives. I don't know how we compare these figures so we can get on some kind of an equal basis.
Well, you can't.
What is the comparison?
You can't compare them unless you get into the question of what we can do with our money.
Well, the figures
You-
that I
you're
originally
talk-
gave you, sir,
You're
the
talk- you're
5.9
talking about-
is
you're talking about
spendable
dollars
income
or-
in terms of constant dollars.
Constant dollars, or, I
5.9%.
don't know. Do you mean pre-Conley dollars or post-Conley dollars?
Constant dollars,
Constant dollars.
based on the growth between August and February 5.9%.
And what does that mean?
Increase
What
in,
does that mean at the supermarket counter?
in real earnings.
Yeah. What does that mean? What we got to pay?
Senator Javits began a new line of questioning.
As I understand it, Mr. Meany, it is a fact that you're challenging this wage price new economic policy on the ground that it's biased in favor of management and capital. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And therefore the facts, the basic figures, become the all-important question. Isn't that correct?
What our people have got to pay in order to live is what's
Exactly.
important.
All right. No question about that.
You bring in corporation figures and profits, you get into an area that I'm sure the housewives have difficulty understanding, you know.
I'm sure in saying you, Mr.
You
Meany.
get fast write-offs and all this sort of thing, and cash flow and everything else. Where does it all come in? I don't know. See, we're very practical. Maybe we're a little bit stupid, but we still insist on saying we pay our prices to the landlord and to the supermarket and to the people who collect interest. We've got millions of people who are now paying 7.5% and 8.5% interest on their homes, which is something that it took a lot of doing to bring about, but Arthur Burns managed to bring it about.
Senator Proxmire shifted questioning to the Price Commission. He pointed out that the Price Commission has not held a single hearing on price increases. President Meany answered,
Another thing, looking at the makeup of the Price Commission, in the interest of fairness, shouldn't there have been someone there representing consumers or represent the thinking of consumers?
Well, of
the whole
course.
commission's got a corporate background.
Let me just ask you about that question. You knew, didn't you, when you went on the board, who the other
Yeah.
members of the board would be?
Yeah.
Well, why did you go on? You knew who these fellas were.
We had a meeting among ourselves, and we went on. We said, well, we've got to see if we can try to make this go, and we made a statement to that effect, that we were going on and tried to see if we could make it work. We thought possibly we could make it work, and I think if they'd have let us alone, we might have made it work.
Senator Proxmire asked,
I don't think we've gotten to the kind of specific and constructive suggestions that I think you may have in mind. At the end of your statement, you say there ought to be substantial revision.
My suggestion I gave to Senator Javits. There couldn't be anything plainer than that. Wages are controlled. For God's sake, control prices. That's what I'm saying.
How?
That's up to you and the president. The president
Well, sure,
says
up
it's
to me.
unthinkable. Well, I think the Congress might have a right to say to the president, well, you better think about it, in the interest of fairness and justice and decency and fair play to the American people.
All right, let me ask you this. Would you go back to precisely the kind of system we had in World War II, for
If
instance?
that was what was needed, yes.
Well, do you think it's needed?
At least it was fair.
Let's get into the area where you and I sharply divide. I've argued that control should be confined to the big unions and the big business. And I say that because the overwhelming majority of our economy is in a competitive situation where the mom-and-pop store couldn't raise prices if they wanted. The big businesses do. Steel does. One big steel company does, and within 24 hours, every other steel company in the country follows suit. The same thing is true of
Yeah,
automobiles.
well, you mean if they're going to win that system? I'd be delighted to talk to representatives of Congress or the executive branch and put whatever thoughts we had into that question. But I certainly am not going to give you my ideas in a vacuum. Are they ready to do this? Is the executive branch ready to make a change?
Well, let me tell you that they certainly won't be willing to make a change unless you, I think there's no question, they don't agree with you on many things, and they say no to you often.
Why don't they sit
but I
down?
think they'd
Why
like
don't
to
they
hear
sit
what
down
your
and talk
position
with
is.
me? If I don't agree with a person, I like to talk to them.
Well,
they don't talk to me.
This is
They
a
don't-
congressional committee?
They don't talk to you either.
Senator Proxmire then brought up salary increases for executives.
Before I yield to Congressman Brown, let me announce that there have been some perfectly enormous increases in salaries between 1970 and 71. I mean, some that knock your eye out. James Kerr from $120,000 to $214,000. Paul Fontaine of the Bendix Corporation, $121,000 to $280,000. Fred Borch of General Electric from $320,000. These are annual salaries to $485,000.
Well, these large salaries are not disturbing. I don't think they have any great effect because you take even a fellow who gets $700,000 a year, if you were to cut him down to $500,000, you'd save $200,000. And if you applied that to the price of the product that his company made, it might make a difference of 0.5% In the automobile business, it might even reduce the automobile price a half a dollar. I don't know.
Mr. Meany, that's the first time I've really
But-
been surprised at a response from you.
But
You could say the
no,
same thing
but
about
I
profits.
haven't finished.
All right,
I haven't
good.
finished.
I'm glad you haven't finished.
I think, however, there's another phase of it, and that is that every worker in this country knows he's under control.
That's right.
And then when he looks at these big fellas, and then he looks not only at their salary, he looks at the stock options that they have and so on and so forth, you get the impression, more and more, that it's not a government for all the people. It's only a government that takes care of certain of the people, and it's sort of an insult to the individual. But as far as the practical effect on prices, it would be very, very small. I heard this morning that the Gallagher report takes the average of the large corporation. It was on the radio this morning. It says $346,000 is the average pay.
Well, let me read you. I think it makes very interesting reading. Chairman of boards got increases of 12.5% to an average of $346,000. Presidents got increases of 17.6% to $288,000. Vice presidents got increases of 13.3% to $242,000. And this is a biased description. It's not mine. It's the Gallagher service. They say Hungry Hal Ganin, for the second year in a row, that's the ITT man, was the highest paid executive, earning $812,000. Of this total, $430,000 represented incentive payments. A recommendation by your organization that you get a salary increase from $70,000 to $90,000. I don't recall whether you accepted that or not.
No, I didn't get it. I had to stick with the pay board rules.
Congressman Brown shifted his tactics.
Let's get back to some more current salary or wage increases. What about the dock workers' wage increase? The 20.8% increase was knocked down to 14.9.
Yep,
Now, at that time, you left the pay board.
that's right.
Was it over that issue? Were you unhappy with the 14.9?
If we had been consulted, if we felt that we had a hand in reaching that decision, if we felt that our ideas on this were being considered by the pay board, I think we might have stayed. This was the decision that they sent through the legal department and laid it on the table and said, gentlemen, don't waste time, we have 10 votes.
Well, if
in other,
you
in other
stayed to
words,
vote,
in
how
other
would you
words,
have voted,
our further participation would have been degrading, I think, to any of us
Well,
at that
may
time.
I ask the question, had you stayed to vote, how would you have voted?
We would have voted for the full increase because they had the full increase coming to them on the question of productivity. If you look in the records of the extension of the legislation, the pay board was instructed to take into consideration questions of productivity. Now here was employers come in with 150%, admitted 150% increase in productivity in 10 years, 33% in the last year or so, and they come in and they're giving the worker a portion of that, not giving it all to them, but giving them a portion of it. So on that basis, and on the basis of the congressional intent, they were entitled to all of that.
Mr. Brown then asked,
As I recall, the AFL-CIO was one of the leaders after World War II in saying, let's take off controls so that we can get meat into the marketplace because we're tired of not being able to buy it as a result of shortages, and we're willing to pay the price. Now,
That's
is that fair? Is that
what we-
right?
That's what we said then, yes, that's right.
And now the position has kind of changed that what we really need here is controls because the prices are going up too fast.
No. Everything we say here is based on the idea that the President of the United States made the decision we wanted controlled. We didn't make that decision. He made it.
I thought you were recommending controls.
No, we were not. I answered that before, Mr. Brown, that we at no time recommended controls. We said always if the President of the United States feels that the inflation picture calls for controls, and we said that when Lyndon Johnson was president. We said it again 3 or 4 times while he was president. We said it every year that Mr. Nixon was president. If the President decides, we will cooperate provided the controls are across the board and call for equal sacrifice by all segments of our society. Now, that's the simple position we
Again,
took.
you'd rather argue about their position than your position.
What do you mean your position?
Well, you'd rather them take the step.
It was my theory that the only one who could call for this was the President.
You are not now calling for stringent controls. I'm still confused about
I
that.
am saying we want stringent controls on prices unless you want to drop the whole business. We say we will take what we got on the wage picture if you control prices, and we think you should control prices. You're not controlling prices. Now, always say if you want to drop the whole business, let the free market, the forces of the free market take place, we'll buy that too.
Either total control or no control.
That's right.
either total controls, fairly and effectively administered across the board on all prices and all wages, or no controls. That, in a nutshell, was what AFL-CIO President George Meany told the Joint Economic Committee. For copies of the complete transcript of Mr. Meany's testimony before the Joint Economic Committee, write to the AFL-CIO Publications Department, 815 16th Street Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20006, and ask for the pamphlet, Meany on Controls.
Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?